Hello YouTube! I'm officially really live this time. So welcome to Free Spirit Beading with Kristen Fagan. I am Kristen Fagan. I've been working with Softflex Company for over 15 years as one of their graphic designers, as well as a jewelry designer, and I do demonstrations at trade shows. I have been published in Belle Armoire and Beadwork magazine, and I have written one booklet with my coworker Sarah Ayler called Beading Bracelet Projects, and I've also co-authored the new book Bead Revolution with my coworker Sarah Ayler as well. Sarah is here on the chat with us, helping me out today, so that you can have any questions. She'll help me answer it. Maybe can link some links to our website and anything else that goes on with this YouTube live. Thanks for being here, Sarah. So today I am going to talk a little bit about using a knitting spool with Softflex beading wire and Softflex craft wire, but mostly I'm going to be talking about how I finish off the end of the knitting spool project with a messy, what I call a messy cone. And I'll also show you what it looks like with a regular cone, but I like to just use wire that I have on hand and create my own messy cone that goes over the crimp tube and sort of gives a nice finish to the project. So I'm going to go ahead and flip you guys down to my work table and show you some examples of what I'm talking about. So if you're not familiar with Softflex wire, this is Softflex wire in peridot color. Softflex is a stainless steel beading wire that is micro braided and then nylon coated, and our color is drawn right into the nylon, so you won't have any fading, chipping, cracking, anything like that when you use our beading wire. Traditionally, people use our beading wire to string beaded projects, necklaces, bracelets, things like that. But we also like to use it in lots of other fun ways, and one of them is knitting. So this is a knitting spool. I'm using what is a 3-pin knitting spool because it's got the 3 pins on top. And we sell these in a 3-pin, a 4-pin, and a 5-pin. These may look very familiar to you. You may have seen something like this when you were younger, done it with yarn. It's the same concept. The pins are a little bit, on our knitting spools, are more conducive for knitting with our wire because they can wrap around the pins really nicely instead of nails. But otherwise, it's very similar to what you may have seen and worked with before. So I have a little piece here that I got started before the show so I can show you how to finish it off. And an example of some that I'm talking about is I have this design here that was knitted with Softflex beading wire in the antique brass color. There's a few different styles you can do with knitting the wire. This is done in style number 1 with just one strand of beading wire. No beads on this one at all, on the inside or on the outside. That's just the wire, and then I've got a focal bead here. And these are the messy cones that I was talking about. So this one is done in the Softflex craft wire, 20 gauge, peacock color for this particular design. Now you can also create a knitted wire project with beads on the inside. Again, this is using style number 1. We have all 3 styles on our website, Softflex, and that is www.softflexcompany.com. Yeah, this particular design does not have a clasp because the Softflex beading wire is stretchy and flexible, especially when you don't have anything strung in the center. You can just slide this right on to your wrist because it stretches and then it forms back down to your wrist like that. And I'll actually say most of the projects today, I don't always use a clasp. So here's another one without a clasp because I just finished it with the cones on sort of a little focal bead. And this is done, like I said, again with the knitting style 1, and I dropped beads down the center. So when you're working on this knitting, when you take it off, there's a core in the center. And on this particular one, because I used the 5-pin knitting spool, it was larger, had a bigger core in the center, and could accommodate me adding these beads to the middle. This is another design that is done with the knitting style 1, but it has 2 beading wires. Let me see if I can get closer, if you could see that. There's actually 2 different colors of beading wire on this one. So there is the antique brass and the copper color. Hi Trish, thanks for joining us. On this one again, I used the 5-pin knitting spool and I was able to drop beads down the center. The wires are attached to this focal, and this focal has a large crimp here, and then the cones sort of finish it off at the end. Can you see the center? Meaning on the center of this, or the center of, I don't have a large one with a center created at the moment. So the last one I'll show you is done, oh, the center of the last bracelet. Yeah, so the center of the last bracelet, this is actually a finding that had a open center so that you can put a cabochon or something in the middle. I'm also an artist, I'm a fine artist, so I create a lot of acrylic paintings. This is actually just a print of acrylic painting that I created. I printed it out on like photo paper and then cut it, placed it inside, and I used resin, I used ice resin to seal it. And that is the focal of that one. So there you have three examples. I do not string the beads first when you drop them in the center. I do all of the knitting first, and when I take the knitting off the spool, then there's an open core in the middle. So I drop all the beads down in the middle. So they're not strung at all, they're just floating in here. And the reason why I like to float them is because it gives it more stretch. You could even string the beads in the center with another strand, but I usually want that stretch so that I can forego a clasp and just make it so that it slides over my wrist. So this particular one used cones, regular just bead finding cones, and these two is what I did the messy wrap on. So I'm going to show you guys the messy wrap today. And this is using the vintage bronze craft wire, and this is using the peacock craft wire, both in 20 gauge. Thank you. I love these bracelets. And today I'm going to show you how to do the finishing part, but I think another day I'll come in and actually just show you all the knitting. So this way you can see how that part goes as well. So I started with a little piece on here. This is using the 3-pin, so it'll be a little bit smaller in diameter than the other ones I showed you. And I'm just gonna, I work right off the spool when I do knitting, especially if I'm just knitting one wire. Sometimes if I'm knitting more, I might cut them, but if I'm knitting just one wire, I'll work right off the spool. Yeah, totally. I will get that on the schedule. So after you cut your knitting off the wire and you want to take it off the spool, you're just going to tuck it into each of these little circles here. Let me get my fingers in the right place. And there's one. And there's two. Sorry, I know this part might be a little hard to see. And then you can pop it off your spool. So this is how it comes out. Like I said, this is a 3-pin, so it's a little bit thinner. When you're working on the 5-pin, you can really see that core a little more easily down the center, and that's where you can drop your beads if you want to drop beads in there. So for today, I'm just going to tighten this up. And you know, this is the side I started with, this is the side I ended with, and it gets a little wonky, so you definitely want a cone or something to go over it. I'm going to show you, I'll probably just do it on this end since this end's a little bit neater. So if you're using just one strand, you can get away with using the 2x2 millimeter crimp tubes to attach the end of your knitting to a clasp or to a focal bead. I have a toggle clasp here today that I'm just going to show you how to make the connection with. If you're using multiple soft flex beading wire, then you're going to want to go up to a 3x3 millimeter bead tube, crimp tube, excuse me, to finish off the end of your knitted piece here. So I'm going to use these copper ones. And these are soft flex. Am I close enough? Are you guys okay? I might have to pick my hands up a little bit. Maybe I'll stand so I can get closer. So first you're going to string on your crimp tube. Like I said, I'm using a 2x2 millimeter soft flex crimp tube. If you have not tried soft flex crimp tubes, they are amazing. They are double the wall thickness of most on the market, and they are seamless. And they are really, really sturdy. It's very important for your crimp to not have the breakage. All right, so there I have my crimp tube, and I strung my wire around my toggle and back down through. I'm just going to use a regular crimping plier today. The regular crimping plier has 2 notches, the bottom notch, which is the crimper, and the top notch, which is the rounder. You're going to place your crimp in the bottom notch first. And give it a nice squeeze, just like a firm handshake. It'll create a divot like that in there. You're going to turn it 90 degrees on its side and place it into the rounder. So if you can see, it's placed into the rounder on its side. Give it a nice squeeze, and then go ahead and move it around so you cinch it in. So now my knitted piece is connected to my toggle, and then you can go ahead and trim off your excess soft flex wire right at the crimp. So you'll see there, now my crimp is nice and secure to my toggle. but it's not very finished looking when you don't have a cone there. So this is where my craft wire comes in. So I am using Softlex craft wire. You could use a crimp cover, but really I'm talking about this part here more than I am the finished crimp. I'm gonna go around the crimp a little bit too, and you could do a crimp cover, but if you left this part of the wire just exposed, it doesn't have that clean of a finish. So that is where my craft wire comes in. Or you can use a beading cone if you have beading cone findings. That would be your alternate option. So I'm going to use a vintage bronze 20 gauge Softlex craft wire. And I'm using my nylon jaw pliers to straighten it out. And then I'm going to cut about, about 6 inches of wire. And you're basically just going to stick your craft wire through your knit. And you can use a chain nose plier or a round nose plier. And a lot of times I use my fingers, but I'll just use a chain nose plier to kind of get it started. And you're going to wrap the wire. You're basically just hugging that knit, wrapping it all the way around. I'm going right up to the crimp. So once it's secure, I like to just use my fingers. So once it's secure, I'm just gonna, and this is why I call it a messy wrap. If you like your designs to be really neat, I'm sure you can do this with a plier, but I like the hand-forged, kind of handmade feeling that I get with the messy wrap. Oh, I'm off camera, sorry about that. Oh, and I was really, really short on my wire. I actually want a lot more than that because I usually go for quite a bit. So I'm going to cut another, I had done 6 inches. I'm going to go I'm going to double that. And I'm just going to cut another 9 inches right now. So that's about 15 inches in total. And then this is why I say it's free spirit beading, because I just go with it. So now I just have to add this on top of the wire that I had before. And then every now and then you can use your chain nose pliers to kind of give it a nice tug and tighten it up. Oh yeah, I love my Softlex Professional Flush Cutter. it cuts like butter, and I've had it for a million years. And then once you get your wrap kind of going, you can use your chain nose pliers to tighten those coils up, get them a little closer together. And I picked up 20 gauge today. That's usually what I use, but I'm sure you can actually do 22 gauge as well, and that might be a little bit softer on your fingers. I'm also standing up, and I'm not used to standing and beading. I might need a bigger table. So I'm going to uncoil it just a smidge because I want to make it a little bit neater at the end here. Uncoil and then come back around. That looks better. Okay, and then the last thing you got to do is just take the end and tuck it under. And I actually have another end there too. Use your chain nose pliers to tuck that end under and in so you don't have any hard edges of the wire sticking out. And I just sort of run my fingers across it and make sure. And there you would have the end of one of your knits. So I even went a little bit further on this one. Yeah, I sure can. So I have this finished one that used the same vintage bronze as that one. I'm just going to lay them down here so you guys can see them all together. And this one used the peacock. Color. I just liked to pick up the little bit of the blue that was in this since the rest of the design was so neutral. It was kind of fun to play with a little bit more of a colorful wire on that one. And I also have this guy, which was done with the knitting spool, but it was done with craft wire instead of beading wire. So this is done with 26 gauge Softlex craft wire. And to get this to be nice and smooth like this, you do need a draw plate. A draw plate is a little wooden tool that has circles in it, and you have to run the wire through that to get it all nice and straight. When you're using the Softlex beading wire, you do not use a draw plate. It just is what it is when it's finished. This is a polymer clay bead. I'm not sure who the designer is of this bead, but it's a polymer clay artisan bead on that one. Now I showed you kind of using a lot of wire, but I do like to do this same technique with macrame, ends of macrame bracelets as well. So I have this one here to show you guys, which is macrame, and then it has a large crimp tube underneath. And it's hard to find the large crimp covers to go over those big 3x3mm crimp tubes. So I did this messy wrap with the 20 gauge craft wire in bronze on the ends of this bracelet. So that's connected there. So this is just covering my crimp tubes. And you can find, if you're like me and you hold on to beading books, that design, the macrame, is actually in Bellamore Jewelry, September, October, November 2015. My goodness, that was a while ago. But yeah, you can see So if you happen to have it, if you're like me and you hold on to these beading magazines forever, you can find the instructions for this particular project with the macrame and the messy wraps at the end in there. And there's the same one in, this is using the citrine and red jasper color. Oh, you might still be able to buy it too. I didn't think of that. That's true. If you go to Belle Armoire Jewelry, you may still be able to pick that one up. And I'm going to show you one other example of doing those messy wraps. These are the earrings on the cover of Bead Revolution. Yes, those are Tiara Cast buttons. Yep, these little buttons are from Tiara Cast. You got it, Sarah. Good eye. So these earrings are on the cover of Bead Revolution, and they have a two 3mm crimps hiding underneath these little messy wraps. And that's what I had done to finish that. You can find that project in our book, Bead Revolution, that I co-wrote with Sarah. And that is using the yellow color craft wire. Yeah, I was going through my stash looking for where I use those messy wraps, because I do them a lot. So if you have Bead Revolution, you could find that project on page 24. If you don't have Bead Revolution, you can find it at www.softflexcompany.com. So that's it for me today for my first my first Free Spirit Beading series class. Yeah, it is handy to have a bunch of colors. I have, gosh, what did I have on hand? I really love the vintage bronze. I use this one a lot. So this is one of my favorite colors. And then I would say that the regular bronze is probably the one I use the most after that. But I also have a few fun greens and stuff like that too that you could use if you're working with lots of different colors. Thank you guys so much for joining me today. I hope it was fun. It was fun for me to be here. I can't believe we've been here a half hour already. And I will put it on the calendar to come here with actually doing a knitting project so you can see how to do the knit part. Do you guys like the larger knit with the beads in the center? Would that be one that you'd like for me to demonstrate? Something like the black and white one here, or the red and bronze one there. I will put that on the calendar to come back. I'll see you guys next Monday. Yeah, they add a little something, don't they, when they're in the center. It's kind of surprising because people, how do they get in there? I will see you again here next Monday at 11 a.m. Pacific Standard Time.